in this week's In-Ear Insights. This is the first of a 4-part series we are doing on a topic that, according to our ICP, we should have done a long time ago, which is the looking at responsible AI. What the heck is this stuff? What are the major issues in it and things like that? So responsible AI generally has like 4 components to it: fairness, transparency, accountability, and human-centeredness. But one of the things I have a problem with, Katie, and I want your take on this, is responsible AI seems like one of those blanket terms that says nothing, in the same way like responsibly sourced food. Like, what does that mean? So to you, as someone who's maybe not as much of a technical nerd as me, what does responsible AI mean to you?
Well, it falls into the bucket of like corporate responsibility and, all of those other things that just kind of feel like buzzwords and, just sort of like, let me just sort of talk the talk, but I'm not going to walk the walk. So if someone says, our company practices responsible AI, I'm definitely going to raise an eyebrow at them because that doesn't mean anything. What it should mean is a sort of, you have to take a step back and figure out first and foremost, what does responsibility mean to you and your company? So it's going to mean different things. And I think, Chris, we've had this conversation before in the context of ethics and morals, is that it's going to be, there is no one right answer. There's a general answer, but then when you get into the details, like what I think is moral and what you think are moral, they're going to be similar, but there's definitely going to be, like, when you get into the minutia, there's going to be differences just because of our upbringing and our way of thinking and our belief system and all those things. And so when you talk about a corporation as a whole, your first challenge is getting all of the people in that corporation to share a thought. And that's number one. That's really hard to do. And number two, when you tack on the term responsibility, then it comes with a lot of weight. And so you have, accountability. You have things that, you publicly want people to know that you're doing, but you actually have to do them and have proof to demonstrate that you're doing those things. And so to go back to AI responsibility, you first and foremost have to define what that means. And so ideally, it would mean, things like we're not using it to do any harm. We're being transparent about it. This is what our data governance looks like. These are the, frameworks that we're using. And so outlining the way in which artificial intelligence is being used in a company. And the responsibility part is that you're not just saying it, you're actually doing it and you're being transparent about it. Whether it's on your website or with your clients or, whatever that looks like, whatever makes sense. If you're a publicly held company, it better be on your website and it better be something that people can easily find. If you're a company like Trust Insights, again, it's case by case. Our responsibility is to our clients. So we don't necessarily have to put it on our website. It's a good idea, but the only people we're responsible to is our clients because they're the ones who are paying customers. We're not publicly held.
So I think that's a really great way of looking at it. Are you reducing potential or actual harm? Mm-hmm. Right? That's basically what responsibility comes down to. You will hear that in political discourse in the U.S. about things like responsible gun ownership, for example. It means you're reducing harm. You're reducing potential or actual harm. So when we think about AI, then governance is part of it. What about the willingness of a company to say, that system's misbehaving, maybe we should turn it off, with the acknowledgement that for some companies that might be like their bread and butter, that might be the secret sauce. How should an executive think about responsible use of AI when your company literally depends on it?
And this is where it starts to get really difficult, And so in a perfect world, and again, I recognize that a lot of times when I talk about these things, it's sort of an idealistic viewpoint, but in a perfect world, as you're thinking about introducing artificial intelligence into your organization, especially if your services and products are heavily reliant on it, you've had the conversations and you've outlined those scenarios, the disaster scenarios of what do we do if AI goes sideways and it misaligns itself with our mission? Are we willing to pull it back? I can almost guarantee those conversations have not been had at companies. Because there's part of it is a lack of education that can happen, and some of it is just willful ignorance that, well, we're here to make money. It's just a business, and like we'll deal with all that crap later. And the dealing with it later is what gets a lot of company into trouble. So in an ideal world, the way to think about true AI responsibility is to plan those things out before they even happen. And so to say, all right, let's say we build Katie GPT and she's going to take over 90% of Katie in real life's job. We're making that investment. Are we comfortable making that investment? What happens if she goes sideways? We're suddenly going to, you know, lose a lot of money, potentially lose a lot of audience because Katie GPT has gone off the rails. Are we willing to take that risk? Because it all comes down to how much risk you're willing to take. At the end of the day, it's software, and software comes with risks. You have to acknowledge how much risk you're willing to live with.
I really like that framework of, if you were to take your existing values, things that your company says you're about, and apply that to AI, to say, what would happen? How could AI violate these values? So if you, for example, said, we are cheerful and agreeable, and we turn Katie GPT into a morose, sort of goth personality, very nihilistic, that would be a case where the software is running afoul of the values. Now, obviously, if your company's values are harm inducing to begin with, then your AI is probably going to follow suit. If your actual practiced business practices do not reflect your values, you're going to have a hard time aligning AI with your values if your business does something opposite. If you say, our employees are our most valuable asset, but actually, no, your shareholders are your most valuable asset and your employees are disposable cogs, then when you implement AI, it's going to prioritize the data that you give it, and the data you give it is skewed towards making your shareholders richer and not treating your employees well.
And you said something that I want to go back to, which is if your values, are to reduce harm, that's going to mean something different to different people. And so, I mean, we can see this playing out every day in our, in politics, in, the economy, like pick a thing. And people's beliefs of what is harmful are vastly different. It's, I don't want to get into the weeds with it, but the point being is that, let's say I'm a company that, this is totally fictional, that believes in, mass producing automated rifles because I believe that it's going to make the world a better place. It's going to give people some kind of safety. Like I've created it in such a way that it's a good thing. I don't believe that I am doing harm. Therefore, my AI responsibility is to use it in such a way that aligns with my belief system, with my mission. My mission being to give more people access to automated weapons. Again, totally fictional. I do not believe that that is the case. But there are going to be companies out there where that is their belief system, that is their mission. And that's why when you talk about, responsible AI, corporate responsibility, ethics, morals. It's such a heated topic of conversation because everyone's entitled to their own way of thinking. You don't have to agree with it. So then your corporate responsibility, if you find that there's, a competitor out there or another company that could, put your audience in danger, whatever the situation, your corporate responsibility is to take steps to protect against that. And that needs to become part of your roadmap, part of your plan for your responsible AI is we will protect against things that are harmful. And that includes these outside companies, these outside beliefs. And again, it gets really messy.
It gets really messy, but I think there's at least some common ground that we can come to. And the common ground we can come to, unsurprisingly, comes from here. Here's how I think, and I want your take on this. Here's how I think that we implement responsible AI with the 5 Ps. First, we have to be clear on our purpose. What is the AI supposed to do? And is that aligned with our values, right? If you're building image recognition technology and it is discriminating against people of a certain ethnicity, is it supposed to do that? If the answer is no, then obviously you have an issue. The second P is people. Who is accountable? What person is accountable for the system? Because no AI is sentient or self-aware. Therefore, a human being at the end of the day has to be the one saying, yep, I did that. That's my fault. Third is on process. Are the systems behaving in the way that is expected? Are they being fair? Are they expressing biases through things like your prompt structure? The fourth is on platform. Can you explain what the system is doing? If you can't take apart the platform into its component pieces and say, this is what this piece does, then you don't have a transparent or explainable system. And then the fifth is you measure the outcome of the machine to say, does this align with our purpose? Like if you're not measuring the output of AI, then obviously you're not accountable, right? You're not behaving in a responsible way. It's like, hey, I made a new car. We don't measure any safety features on it. Like, well, then it's not a safe car if you've done that. So what do you think about using the 5 Ps as a framework for responsible AI?
I think it's a really great framework in terms of capturing your requirements, in terms of transparency, and in terms of accountability. And those are sort of, the key tenets of responsibility is you have to say what you're doing, you have to be transparent about it, and then you have to actually do the thing. And so that brings us back to where we started in the conversation. And so the 5P framework is a really good place to start for that because you clearly define your purpose. You say this is why we're doing it, this is what we're doing it for. To your point, you have the person who's accountable, but to that you can build on who's in our audience, who is going to be the recipient of the thing that we're doing, who is going to be maintaining the thing that we're doing, who is going to be watching. There's a lot of different roles, both internally and externally. Then, of course, you have your process of here's how we're doing the thing. That's probably, in this particular context, one of the most important P's is how we're doing the thing. And this is where your data governance comes in. This is where your sort of your guardrails live in terms of this is what we are and aren't doing. And then your platform, which is the tools and software, and then your performance, did we do the thing? And so I think that for companies that are looking to start off with, our clients have been asking, how are we using AI? Or, we want to put some sort of statement out of here's how we're using AI in a responsible way. I think the 5P framework is a really good place to start to frame out that messaging because it hits on all the really important points.
Should companies have a template, based on the 5 Ps where they can just answer a bunch of questions and then essentially have their responsible AI statement?
I think they should because you may not start off getting a lot of those questions, but as the technology evolves and as the usage of it increases, you will get those questions. I know that a lot of our clients have already gotten questions around, well, if you're using AI, then, I don't have to pay you as much because it's just expediting things. And it's a misunderstanding of how, it's a disconnect between that client and their clients of how they're using artificial intelligence. And so I think that having, going through the exercise of the 5 Ps gives you that clarity to say, well, this is the response we can give. Because what you don't want to do, again, idealistic, is get defensive about it. Like, no, we have to keep charging you the same. If anything, we're going to charge you more because we're using advanced technology. And it's like, that's not a useful conversation. You want to be just very clear and direct. Like, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. This is how we're doing it. This is how it benefits you. Therefore, this is the value of it.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe we should make a custom GPT or something that can walk people through building a responsible AI statement. I think that would be an interesting exercise to do sometime.
I would actually say what you want to do is build a custom model that walks you through the 5 Ps, and then one of the use cases is an AI responsible statement.
And we'd have to have probably want to have at least a lawyer check it over to make sure that you're not saying something that's highly risky.
Well, and sort of that's sort of the other half of the conversation is, AI is great. AI does a lot of things, but it still needs it. It should have a lot of human intervention. I was having this conversation with one of our clients last week because they're newer to AI and they were asking about, what does the process look like? Is it start to finish? And I'm like, no, people still need to be involved. And that, if you're building out an AI responsibility statement, you could include, and all of this has been checked by our human lawyer. That can be part of your people, statement, part of your data gathering to say, we have lawyers, they have looked this over and they are okay with us saying these things. We're not causing harm back to, the values. We're not causing harm to our company by putting this information out there. It's a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm going to, at the very least, put together yet another framework where I'm going to call it Raft because I think it's something that is a good starting point. So respect for human values, accountability, fairness, and transparency as the 4 linchpins for where you should be thinking applying those principles to each of the 5 Ps. When it comes to generative AI and the people. Is there a respect for human values, right? Are we saying the AI should support humanity and not detract from it? Is there an accountable person? Does it treat people fairly? Is there transparency available to the affected parties for how AI does things? I think we could probably make a very interesting framework for helping people get granular with the 5 Ps when it comes to responsible use of AI.
The one modification I want to make, so the couple of times now that you've mentioned accountability, you keep trying to single it down to one individual person. When you talk about something like corporate responsibility, sure, you can sort of put everything on the shoulders of the CEO, but really it's the actions of the company as a whole. So the company as a whole has to be accountable. If you have to pick one person, yeah, then you pick the CEO. But I want to sort of clarify that it's not solely their responsibility to hold the company accountable. The company as a whole has to be accountable. And that comes from being clear about your purpose, being clear about what you're doing so that people will get on board and actually do the thing. And so I just want to make that clarification. I understand that you're saying who's the one person who has to answer to it, but it's an unfair notion to think that that one person can make everybody, wholly accountable.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about that based on the way GDPR is implemented, where companies who are required to adhere to GDPR must have a data protection officer. It is a requirement of the law and I would expect that as AI continues to evolve, there will be someone similar who's like an AI protection officer. Like, yeah, your job is literally to identify and mitigate and answer on behalf of the company those risks. Now, with GDPR, it's usually the CIO or the CTO that is also the data protection officer, but not necessarily, not always. There's sometimes the CDO, but in bigger companies, they have to have a full-time person, whose job is to answer to the EU courts.
So if you think about that in terms of the 5 Ps, that becomes part of your requirements gathering. So what is the purpose? Who are the people? You know, based on what we want to do we have the people in place to perform this function, to, do the thing? And if the answer is no, then perhaps you need to pause for a minute and figure out the skill sets, because if you have 4 of the 5 Ps, that's not good enough. You have to have all 5 in order for it to be, something that's valid. You can't have people, process, platform, performance without a purpose. You can't have purpose, process, platform, performance without people, and so on and so forth. And so they all need to work together. So if you don't have someone in your organization who is comfortable owning AI responsibility, you're not ready.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
It's like Pokemon. Got to catch them all.
Sure.
All right. In part 2 of this, we're going to talk about responsible AI specific to things like biases and prejudices and how that impacts your data. So you're going to want to stay tuned next week for that episode. If you've got some thoughts about what responsible AI means to you that you'd like to share, pop on by our free Slack group. Go to trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers, where you and over 3,500 marketers are asking and answering each other's questions every single week about data and AI. And wherever it is you watch or listen to the show, if there's a channel you would rather have it on instead, chances are we have it. Go to trustinsights.ai/TI podcast. You can find us where podcasts are served. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.